また変わるで今。川주사 님.川주사.
Cover the egg.
Sendiri.
Teacher. You must say this.
Begin with the Heart Sutra in English on page 2. Thus I have heard. One time the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the 5 skandhas and their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should a son of a lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of a lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The 5 skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, and compositional factors in consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are inborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom, and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, a mantra which calms all suffering, should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teyata om gate gate paragate parasam gate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the venerable Sharagati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed. Continue with the short mandala offering on page 16. Saji Purki Joje Medora Rera Leye Nide Jabane Sanje Yindo Mide Buvaye Bragwe Nanda Yina Jabarajo Jetsun Nama Naba Jina Je Jogyo Gala Jeze Tujene Jada Tambe Duje Zemana Zenji Juje Jabo Wampo Rena Medala Gane Atayane. Continue with the refuge prayer on page 22. Saje Chadam Soje Janala Janju Bardo Dane Jasuj Dage Juje Jibe Sonam Rala Vijra Sanje Druparajo Sanje Chedam Soje Janala Janju Bardo Dane Jasuj Dage Juje Jibe Sonam Rala Vijra Sanje Druparajo Chedam Soje Janala Janju Bardo Dane Jasuj Dage Juje Jibe Sonam Rala Vijra Sanje Druparajo.当作苍的双肩呐，对世界龙举起，给微信你们东西是，我都把它算什么的，在这里马学了的，多的他了，大为绿了所算家是，我都做了啥学的，那边绿，对世界龙举起是呢，对光里呀，年去忙不去。写这个经历，但军队得到了电影，军队得到一种方，说了嘛的个绿龙就给他得到，世界的呀，龙军路西边就有那个切头，
대다 수무 소당 당루 당당 대소대 배 지만지니 상라만노와 어떤지 용하나 아니 친이단 데미 나누단 데미 아니 기위신이 야고치 때고 그래서 엔트네 인도 소소 된다기 세대 기위신이 지나 제가 중소나 엔트 뒤 난도 용도 아니 소소가 메인테니 도스 때고 그래서 내가 가지 들어가다 소소 말해.
So we have roughly covered this verse 6 in our last session. It says, therefore you should protect your body and so on, so that they can be useful to sentient beings by not abandoning your spiritual teacher and by constantly reading the sutras. So we have talked about how do we actually give away our body and so on to all other sentient beings. And now we are not just giving out one's body and so on to others, but we need to understand inappropriate way of giving away the body and so on. As we talked during our previous sessions, that the appropriateness of time and appropriateness of circumstances, which need to be understood in order to give away one's body and so on. In which it is for this reason, where in the third line, when it says, by not abandoning your spiritual teacher and by constantly reading the sutras. By constantly reading the sutras also help us, but it requires a precise explanations from or the instructions from someone who is qualified enough to give these teachings, or the qualified spiritual teachers. Hereby not abandoning spiritual teachers really means that rely upon a spiritual teacher who could actually give you the instructions of how one can practice, such as giving over one's body and so forth.
요래 다든지 그것이 교신이 생긴데 나중에 들락다 가게 그게 대상 많이 봐. 근데 내 그게 교신이 돼. 저 남비 추다. 저 추다 되니 시행하죠. 대나네 남비 추다 되니 시행하죠. 대야 안에 대화 체중 니가 나네 대화 체부 아니 교신이 같은 지레 대나네다 지나 교신이 대화치면 하는 지와는 주발치면 대화 그 얘기는 교신이 아니 진도하다 달 아니 리버상아 되지 되게 교신이 봐 교신이 이름을 뭐 근데 요래 제가 근데 나중 모두 달려라 그게 되나 제방에 매박을 장에는 매주 지나 고글랑에 교신이 그게 되나 요러 근데 나시기 추리를 소작되는 게 용어를 쳐서 그게 되는 용어로 이나 그 되게 교신에서는 또 아니 난기 치다 려고 truyền 다 소소기 메시지 소기 부담 된다고 나한테 교신에서 많이 봐 난 세주 뇌당게 되는 탑등에 아니 교신이 된다고 하고 제가 근데 이제 나게 생긴 되사데 다 그래가고 손라 손거를 레레도 하면서 포토도 소소기 가서 지추 가세시 유면 마티베 근데 라다리 지니서 생주 도스 주비 거래 가나 두카바도 대만서 고신주지나 가나 간자지 포토에 저와 근데 된데 하장기 두카와 안나게 생주 뉴단기 더 친지 말로바 된다 된신에 소소리야 된다기 나누 용에 된다기 체리 된다지리야 아니 송고요래.
Now here it says a spiritual teacher. And teacher should be qualified. It's not just an ordinary teacher, but someone who has learned, not intellectually, but gain experience. And this is what we call spiritual teacher, and particularly the Buddhist spiritual teacher. And all of these teachers, we have when we speak about a spiritual teacher in general and Buddhist spiritual teacher in particular, should have a distinct quality in comparison to the regular teacher. For instance, if the regular teacher or the teacher in general, as long as they are able to give you the instructions, reading from the book or the text, whatever, and they can, if they're able to give you the instructions and explain it to you, that is pretty much enough. Such as, the teacher who actually teaches us in a regular class. But when it comes to the spiritual teacher here, spiritual teacher, not only that he or she should have learned the vast teachings of the Buddha, but also gain quite a level of spiritual experiences. And this is what we call the spiritual teacher. And when speaking about this particular, the spiritual teacher or Buddhist spiritual teacher, there are many different teachers, such as teachers of the Mahayana and Anyana teachers. And within the Mahayana teachers, we do have teachers of causal perfection teachers, Vinaya teachers, and the teachers of the Vajrayana. All of these teachers should have a skilled in not only subduing his or her own mind, but also should have a skilled in subjugation of the minds of other beings, the followers, in other words, the disciples. And someone who, this qualification is something that is very important as a spiritual teacher, because without having an experiential knowledge, just having reading text and understanding the meaning of the text, and having some kind of intellectual understanding is not very sufficient to become a qualified spiritual Buddhist teacher. Because when you look at subduing the mind, it's not easy at all. Although this mind is something that is invisible, it's not something that is concrete. When it comes to the subduing or making a change of our mind, it's something that is the most difficult part, as we all know that. We can, through our own experience, we know how difficult it is to tame our mind. So therefore, it is such a difficult task a spiritual teacher should have. Something that is really hard to subdue, something that is very hard to change. It is therefore one should rely upon the teacher who has this experience and who have not only, uh, vastly learned, but also have experience of all these teachings, so that teachers can skillfully give the instructions that is more comprehensive and lucid, so that the followers can have a precise understanding of how to work with their mind.
자상 기회신이 뭐 동시에서 자상 아무데래 기회신이 있으면 그 기와스니 모세였다야 아 손도와 자상 기와스야 돼 다까지 공을 배주셔요래 기와스야 돼 아니 자와는 어쩔 수 없다는 거래 자상 자와 들어야다 자와 내가 자와 잠보스도 여러 와대인데 자와 잠보지리야 아니 기와스 자상 아주 기와도 디바빵 스라그로와 the one give to chess now you rag and to nang do chata give a do sano and you give it sano chata give us and then give a do say give it give a tadadi and chawa chiloko chawa de chawa sambo de nebani man chawa sambo chiloko chata then the chawa sambo do rani gi chimachi shiba na rani gi shiba na shi gi yen ya 아니 진짜 말로봐 된신에다 된통에 대략이 세대기 아니 라니 경계인데 아니 된 난도에 못와 아니 최인도 때문에스 어떠신 거예요?
So the spiritual teacher in the Tibetan is Gewi Shinyin, which literally means a virtuous mentor or virtuous tutor, we could say. So what is meant by virtuous tutor, virtuous mentor, is to someone who can give you precise instructions on how to accumulate virtue, how to engage in a virtuous act. And virtuous act is something that is positive, which brings forth a positive result. So it is by relying upon a spiritual teacher, one will be able to engage in activities that are virtuous and refrain from engaging in the activities that are non-virtuous or the negative. So this can be one's engagement of the actions of the virtues and refraining from actions of the non-virtues can only be done by relying upon a spiritual teacher, by following the teacher's instructions. Because we're not very sure what kind of actions that are virtuous, what kind of actions that are non-virtuous. Particularly speaking about the actions of the mind. So therefore, relying upon a spiritual teacher who is qualified is something that is very, very important. And someone who has this experience of engaging in virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind by him or herself, and gain his experience, gain a high level of experiences. And someone who is not only that also, but also someone who is very skilled in giving the instruction to the followers, unmistaken instructions to the followers, and complete instructions.
텐데 개와세 안에 자와 상보대 두발하나 말을 통해 가르쳐 두거나 류토니 루에요레 마부토니 루에요레 예주토니 루에요레 자상 당마랑 소리 유대 루에요레 마요레 예요레 생요로 제가 대손디 아니 또 스페셜 타임 비카래야 야는 자왕에 봐 루루고요레 yana jawa zambo tene rundu go yore chazan ka jawa zangi kaya mai tene ru chokore kulu ma de sona tene ayu go yore cha tene yindu da nambi shona shi yondu sambo chadan lyu tone jawa zambo sanada gewa sanada tene duwa yore ma tone duwa yore yek tone duwa yore te song nani chang ane yek tone ane gewa duwa de kichi wa tsa go yore chazan 나주 되는 추유서도 하면서 추제랑 버르지야 개와도 서리 추제 내려라 그랬죠. 난 추유서 내려라 그랬죠. 추유서야 되잖아. 주변으로 보거래. 주가. 저단 추유서야게 리자게 지나 ධර්마서야 되래. 저 ධර්마서야 리자게 되게 된다. 뭐라 몸을 때 자유서래. 이 된다 뭔가 여기 나니 아니 벽에서 저기 추세야 되네지라고 해. 추세야 돼. 저다 추세야 돼. 랑이 원즈가 추지스니스. 추 탐지해야 관로에 찍어래. 야한테는 추 탐지를 막고 하지네. 득바다 개와세야. 개와리야. 관로야 나. 자와 상불 관로야. 양 주주당 관로야. 저다 또 추제세야게 추대 추를 거기서 뭐 주바세야. 거기 주세야가나 말한소 령아예 손데 주가 뭐보여래 말한소 령아예 손한테 자왕에 뭐 두고여래 자와 상보여 두고여래 제가 다 자왕에 받도 두이나 말한소를 좋아라고여래 자와 상보도 두나 말한소 계산하고여래 소설 계산하고여래 다 자왕에 받도 두소이나 령아예 손한테 자왕에 받도 두소이나 말한소 좋아가려나 말해서 눈에 용어요. 소들이 자와 상보주 두스마이나 대인 지부터라 말해서 대지 용어로 대지된 말해서 고야 용어 거지래. 동안에 말해서 고야 용어 거지래. 대인도 말해서 고야 대지 용어지 봐라. 아니 대주 아니 자와 상보지를 개와지를 고로 제가 대인도 용어 예선되게 자와 멤버주 두다 상보주 두스야 돼. 다 단답하는 말해서 kondido mamboji chawa ngego duya thala kondi thedo yore lui nanda ma inanda ye inanda ji lui page chawa chibe kare kadu ina yer ne de mudo ji ta tenda ji tol mo ayu gore ma gi ma ju ina ane ji kare jena ya ma ji shere ne be ma ji ma yu gore ane nang se na ina theju mo ane be chada mo so gi yewo de so ni ane do jang ji te dia ma to ya wa te ya a jang no no ba de yin du de da gi go so gi ja wa de nge ba chol ta yin bi ka ya en de de ja wa de gi ane le nge ba sa ne le de ane shuma che da te yin bi le de shuma che da te yin bi ka ya ane ra ne ya an de be de do nga ji le yin go ro me yin go ro de yin du ma so mo go ya du nge yin so ente ju jawa ngeba le ya de samjo jewo de samjo jewa la gosong de ani ju tang ko jo tang ko da jo tang ko jada da nang bi chu na ma su yu bi ka ya gosong ge jawa ngeba de jawa zambo je ba ju dang ge ta ja ja ji su yu wa de no ni nang chu ze nang se de jada lu ma ye so mo ni le da ma ni de chi che che ane sende nangjine nangchue zo lunga ye songa ane juge kichimre de nane ja nang sende juge kichimre ye o to so yo gore.
So, as we mentioned earlier, that when we speak about the actions, the virtuous actions or the positive actions, there are virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind. Those are the actions that are all those actions are encapsulated within these three actions, either bodily actions or verbal actions or the mental actions. So now, when we are utilizing our body, speech, and mind, into actions. Either one's actions of the body, speech, and mind become non-virtuous, or the virtues, or sometimes neutral, neither of two. So, according to the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, we need to make sure that when we are engaging in our actions of the body, speech, and mind, should not be influenced by the negative forces. In other words, it's negative motivations. And always the teachings, if you look at the teachings of the Buddha or the Dharma, it's nothing other than engaging in virtuous deed. And virtuous deed of body and speech, and particularly the virtuous deed of mind, the mental virtuous deed, on the positive mental deed, is strongly emphasized, importantly emphasized, in other words. Here, in the Tibetan term, che, which is original term of Sanskrit, translated from original term from Sanskrit, the Dharma. Dharma can be had many different meanings. There are many meanings. Some meanings are interchangeable, some are not. However, this Dharma, in this particular context, Dharma can be understood in terms of something that actually coming, something that can be changed, something that makes change. That is what is meant by Dharma. What kind of change that we are talking about here is the changing of one's own mind, changing of one's mental actions, not letting one's mental actions remaining under the power of negative thoughts and emotions, but rather by mitigating that, our regular way of mental actions, and transforming those mental actions into a virtuous mental actions. That is what is meant by Dharma in this particular context. Because normally, if you look at ourselves, when we engage in our actions of the body, speech, and mind, if we examine very carefully, most of our actions of the body, speech, and mind will become a non-virtuous or negative. We may, by bodily actions that are something that are not really motivated by positive thoughts, or one's bodily actions may become offensive to others, or may become a destructive, even harmful to others. And then even when we speak, we verbally, offend others and become something that becomes very destructive to others. And then when we look at our mind, especially, whenever we think of something, the way we think of ourselves, the way we the way our mind functions, it really functions under the power of attachment and aversion. We will not recall, if you really examine, the only problem with us is we're not examining our mental actions. But if we really examine our mental actions, we will not recall that our mental actions are not influenced by negative thoughts such as attachment and aversion, particularly attachment. So here, now we need to change this habitual pattern of our motivations. So try not to let our mind remaining under the power of those negative thoughts and emotions, and try deliberately to change their thought processes. Because these negative thoughts, that negative actions derived from these negative thoughts, will give rise to suffering, which is the result that we ourselves will experience. Nobody else will experience this. As a positive deeds will give rise to the result of positive or the virtuous result. And the happiness is that we all seek to achieve, and suffering is that none of us, seek to achieve, but rather we all put in all efforts to get rid of the cause that brings about sufferings. It happens to us because of our bad habituations, our mental habituations. So, therefore, from now on, I must do something that is, whenever I engages in the actions of the body, speech, and mind, making sure that my actions of my body, speech, and mind become virtuous, so that will give rise to a positive result in the future. I will do my best to stop the negative actions of the body, speech, and mind, so that I will be able to free myself from experiencing this negative result or the sufferings in the future. So therefore, in this way, whenever we engage in our actions of the body, speech, and mind, I will do so my best to really becoming those actions of the body, speech, and mind as the virtues. And so therefore we are here to learn about Dharma, to practice Dharma, is to change our behaviors of the body, speech, and mind. And particularly, Dharma practice emphasizes on the changing of one's own mind.
쪼로 자와도 노로 자와도 노소이나 아니 자와 멤버지 자와 노들 좀 자와 무인에서도 마트비 자와 멤버지 통로 샤고 근데 근데 자와 되게 랭이 받잖아요 뭐 되게 이제 대응할 수 없는 농아요 되거든 제가 대인데 당하면서 봐 주비 가래야 주야 다라래 소소주도 되게 센트 주야래 컨트롤 매봐 맞아 매봐 아니 단ze 매봐 단ze 매봐 어디래지 따바 많이 봐 따바 되면 좀 봐서 매봐 써 버려 나도 주반 되게 잡아대 다음에 봤다 별로지 뭐 야제니 대가 매봐 써 보여요 제가 는 나주에서 남비 추게 애니 바게 너니 주고야도 저어디 나센데레 저는 고소제 주야데 되나니 남센데레 제가 남센데 다바 주니 때문에 타만 남센데 간데지 털바 주도가 제거나 주 남지 왜네 주지만 지 강이바 대모여 손도 바게 통통이 지로 뭐 써고 주 남지나 돈은 것도 되게 싫어서 그래 추나지 내로 모여서도 통통이 지기 대대지 통파 주고 요래 다른 것을 줄 때면 도와 제가 돈이 모여서도 또 맞도 진짜나 아니 가르치는 거 뭐지 때되고 여러 제가 드네도 남기 상로대 봐 주니 가르치 더 주도 제거나 드네 녀목을 뒤바기 내보다 시제 뒤바기 내보도 뭐 통에게 아니 추나지 내로 지만지 영문성도 하게 애는 통통하게 왜 들어지 뭐할까 주고요. 어때나 안에 라니 주기 로들지 주바다 라니 주로 들지 주바나 시기 아니 샤르바 친지 말로가 돼 토바 어디게 기회시는 친이 되지 소속이 내서나 안 들지 샤르토니 대대 나도 뭐 하진 소속이 최근 때문이나 는 고란이야 나는 부동산와 세대 요소가 안을 안에야 돼 당연히 말고 때니 안을 안에네 되나시지 안을 왜 그러면 봐 또 차트에 그 요소가 되는 전에는 기회신이 뭐 도시 세대 되는 투리 있어요.
So practicing Dharma is very important to tame our mind. Whenever we talk about practicing Dharma, the practicing Dharma should be understood in terms of training or taming our mind. This is all about Dharma practice. Because if you look at ourselves at this moment, our mind is completely overpowered by attachment, anger, these harmful thoughts, self-grasping, and grasping onto, permanent, something that is impermanent, but looking at this as a permanent, and taking a suffering as a happiness, and looking at something that is impure as a pure. So all of this are completely present in our mind at this time. So having those kind of mind presence in our mind, our minds are present in our mind, in our continuum, in other words, whenever we engage in our actions, our body, speech, mind, body and speech, body, speech, and mind always become a negative or non-virtues. Although one may consider that one's action is something that is virtuous. If you look at very carefully, all these actions are always tinged with one of those negative thoughts and emotions, either by attachment, either by anger, either by harmful thoughts, either by grasping at self or phenomena or eternalism, eternal views, and so forth. We will not find our actions are free from all this. So therefore, now practicing Dharma by relying upon a spiritual teacher need to be will enables one to break the chain of those processes of attachment, anger, grasping, view of eternalism, and so on. Because if we remain under those negative thoughts and emotions, when we look at the world, we look at the world erroneously, and without the world we that view will not corresponding to reality. So, uh, so now we need to change this our worldview, the way we look at the world, the way we look at our way we understand things in events. And this needs to be changed by breaking all this, by subjugating all those negative thoughts and emotions. And this can only be done by internal change. Our physical behavior and verbal behavior, the changing of verbal actions alone will not bring this change. The change really requires that mental change is something that is really required. It is therefore, in the Tibetan term for the Dharma, is Nangche, which means internal Dharma, which is Dharma that actually works internally. So, with such practices, by changing one's mind, and finally, or eventually, one will be able to ascertain how things really are. One will be able to ascertain the things which correspond to reality, in other words. And by having such experience, eventually this experience will become what we call direct experiential knowledge of how things really are. In other words, the direct realization of ultimate nature of reality. In other words, emptiness. So all of this, our listening to the teachings of the Dharma is all how we can change ourselves mentally. How this mind that we have can not really become remaining under the influences of the negative thoughts and emotions, but how can we really make this mind that we have is something that become an antidote or remedy for for elimination of those negative thoughts and emotions, and making sure by practicing Dharma, one's mind, one can one can be able to achieve. One will be able to. One should be able to achieve this antidotes towards obscuration of liberation and obscuration of omniscience. So therefore, the teacher relying upon a not abandoning spiritual teacher that it says in here is something that is very telling here. It is a very important point that is raised in this particular verse. So spiritual teacher is not as someone who has a name of spiritual teacher, but someone who has these qualities, and someone who gained this experience, and through his or her own experience can skillfully, give instruction to others, or to pawn those teachings to others. So therefore, relying upon a qualified spiritual teacher is something that is very important, and it is emphasized very strongly in this particular text itself.
That day Kalia Moseki to a chimbu on the Joanna and Raju Senti Nalia Niji Chimbo Jetuya and Telia Janju Seramuche to the Jetuaki and Karsaway Chimbete Cheatan and the Chilu Chetangi and touching you more about Dentume. The Neki Shinijuko.
And particularly, the Mahayana Dharma teacher should have this experiences and have a skill in giving the teachings on how to cultivate great compassion and bodhicitta, unmistaken instructions of how to cultivate great compassion and bodhicitta.
That in Nibade Dode Tala Tata Vies Adere Dode Tala Tata Vies Sambo that in the Givishini Tinida Tendava Timoto Tony and Dan Dode Tasalia and so Chusanchi Ores Ta Sanji Sumbe Gadan and Dan Dojumongoji, Tenaji, that Tenjumambore. Just the do Takan Shina, and also let you get Sean Tadan, Anthony Shaw and David Junju Chimo, or the Sogi, and the Solia, and to Nita Mayimba, to the number of Kuntus order. Tabas some Tabarish to do, Nimachajas and Roch, Chazan, and Telia, and Natawa Regitaria, and then Towers, Tamachu and Dani, Shamayam and Yani and the Ta, and the Givishin Elia, country compo show, and the Sosokia to us, Mata, and the Givishin there, all those that Givishin Elia, country compo show, and the Rani gave mutant Tanita, and the Sundi Tony, those, and the Tavari, the Regitaria, Sosokia. To some of the Jetuina, and the Jumba was also Julia, and then Shwani Sheva Nashiki, Sosolia, and then Diva, Topa on Yude, at the Najiram Julia or those who said.
So it is for this purpose, the last line of the 6 verse where it says, and by constantly reading the sutra. By constantly reading the sutra here, what it really means is now, by reading the sutras and receiving the instructions of the sutra from the teacher verses. And this should be in a very consistent manner, not just reading a couple of days or a week and just, then leave aside and not reading at all. Reading sutras and whatever that one have read, and one should consult one's understanding to ensure that your understanding is correct with one's spiritual teacher. This is the way of practice it. This is a way of learning. This is the way we gain experiential knowledge. This is the way we gain spiritual realizations. It's not just having a book and reading that book and picking one from there, one from there, and will not really make us change, will not really make us gain spiritual realizations. So therefore, one read the sutras, not only reading, but receive the teachings from the teacher, listening to the teachings, contemplation, and meditations. All those three should be combined. And the teachings of the Buddha, such as sutra, and there are sutra and tantra, the teachings of both sutra and tantra they're given by the Buddha, and also the teachings of the great Indian masters, such as the training ontology of Shantideva, the Siksa Samuccaya that we are currently discussing on, and also important to study the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life by Shantideva. So this practices and studies must be so consistent by relying upon the teachers. And if one is able to do this, and one's practice, receiving the teachings, contemplations, is so consistent, then before long, one will be able to gain certain level of realizations of the Dharma. But just for this, one should rely upon the spiritual teacher.
Dode dala tata yu sona shi, tati ndi karya, dode tada tabar yi tani, inti tuanda de sozoge, tambo shiba che, tambo da tuba che, ane tubi tendle, yang sang, ane sambi tuandi sozoge, jeba jibi jetala ya tani, yang gwani, to chini nangi, sen, juji tangwe tani chire, chasante yung so mambuchi yang ko shiba tsangi ene ndigo yubasana tina yung yorwa masa tingdu ki shiyan rupi jena te soso bi ma shiba chini en te soso chiso nal pyoche tani soso ko matsayagi tsogu yu tola pyoche tani mato te ladar chi nane chi yayang sang yayang gongsi ke chego yu marwa tan de sen juya ki talang yin so tang rangi juya ki sen juya talang yin so tang and he was on the shine and do go. The time you get sent, you are down to women, do a tongue of our Jalan, a yang, tubaje, tubadiata, Casa Mona Yari, Timothy Tuson, Sani, Tetan Majiva, yang, two, yang, son. Son said, so the can't to be 20 so the Shinjuji at the son severe. Yang said, then the Shinju, Jeba yang. 나중에도 공지 비그래 제공당 조공서로 제가 제공의 양양 제공 제공양양제 양양제 신주제 에는 다리에 소속이 집이 제타르지 내거라 소속이 단 아도 그래서만도 단대가 레샤 상상이 소속이 자자자다 등기만 두고 제타지 내서나 에는 대리 양양제 먹거든 다가 인선이 대리 양은 로지지도 되네 에는 템바샤네 에는 배면도 모두 제때라 이 조선 고도야마를 토하니 ene 야야나네 지고 틀었더니 ene 르비 랑게 센주 차보데네 르비 봐 누가 단토야 되네 중을 제가 대인도 대두서 동동지나네 무슨 주와 단토야 돼 공부를 제가 좀 된데 라니 있나야 되네 가시 담에 손에 쳐사네 ene 되는 손으로 제가 당거들이 담보이서 랑상 주가 단토야지 말때 얘네야 고포장 르비고 소서 쳐이유 되니 엔 도스 나를 제고야 되기 말해.
So now one should read the sutra, which is, and by constantly reading sutra, as we discussed earlier, that just by reading alone is not sufficient. Whatever the sutta that one may have received, and one may have read, must be received instructions from the spiritual teacher, the qualified teachers, and listening by paying a close attention to the instructions, and then contemplate on the meaning of the sutras. So here, when speaking about contemplation, contemplation here referring to analyzing. It's more like analytical, process of thinking. Whatever the teachings that you may have received, you heard from the teaching, for the teacher must be analyzed. The meaning must be analyzed. After the final analysis, when you arrived at the point where you think this is the meaning that I got, this is the meaning that I really understood. And then one should place one's mind upon that single pointedly, is what is called meditations. And those three should be always inseparable. It should always be there. Listening, teachings, contemplations, and meditations. With this, one will be able to then make a change of one's mind. One can make a change. Because that the knowing the Dharma intellectually alone is not sufficient at all. And receiving the teachings at one time is not sufficient either. One should listen to the teachings again and again, time and again. Similarly, contemplate on the meanings of the teachings again and again. It is through the repeated listening to the teachings, repeated contemplations, in other words, repeated analyzations will lead oneself to understand what is reality. When you get that, one can then, place one's mind upon this reality and then meditate. So therefore, the very importance of not separating those three factors, which are listening to the teachings, contemplations, and meditations. It should always, remain intact or combined. It is through this our untamed, mind can be tamed. Because again here, our untamed mind can be tamed. When we speak about taming our mind, untamed mind, taming of untamed mind will not happen overnight. Just for a short period of time of listening to the teachings and practice will not happen. Will not have any result. If you look at and the just biographical anecdote of the Buddha himself. Buddha has gone through numerous practices of accumulations of mirrors and purification of negativities for says great three accomplishments. So therefore, when we speak about engaging in practice, we should not really think of having a result immediately. Will not happen. We should be more patient and think of, regardless of how long it may take, I will do so to make my mind, to bring about transformation of my mind. Because right from the beginning of this time up until now, the way we remain in this world as ordinary beings, the way we change ourselves, encage ourselves within this unimagined existence is because of this negative mind that we have in us. So therefore, we have remained up until now from the beginning of this up until now, I'm under this influence of this negative thoughts and emotions. Now, I will do my best to bring about this change, regardless of how long it may take. I'll make an effort to really work very hard to bring about a change in my mental and physical health. That's a habit.
기회진이 뭐도 도대다라 근데 답을 때기 틀을 때니 근데 왕기 담이 담아들 소소 늘려서 봐요 그죠 손을 써봐서 다 뢰다 근데 뭐 저도 계자 소소는 되지 제가 늘려서 봐 근데 야고죠 손 그래서 또 손이
So just therefore you're protecting one's body, resources and so on. It's very important.
단대인데 르는 저기서도 제 방향당 방향도 같이 다 숨어서 더 되는 거지. 단대니마 아니 르는이 밖에 숨을 거라 간다 이마데. 당 지시해야 되는 거요도.
So with this we have what we have covered the brief explanation of how to give away one's body, one's good gains, and so forth. And now detailed explanation will be followed in the next verses and so on.
That thing was a toy, no?
Shall we take some questions if you have?
Another question with a comment. Practicing Dharma sometimes feels like trying to swim up a waterfall. So, Geshe-la, thank you for encouraging continued practice in the face of something that doesn't always seem to show any progress. Did you understand?
Can you say that? I didn't hear it.
Okay. Sometimes practicing Dharma feels like trying to swim up a waterfall. And so I say thank you for encouraging us to continue practicing in the face of a situation where it doesn't seem like much progress is happening.
Okay. 이게 그런 남자 계시라 템퍼처 순도 도시시가 예수 그리스도님께 수소에 아직 제님의 제대로 그때 녀의 제를 갖고 아직 수소 준비를 시라면게 잠시를 아직 제가 저월에는 내가 좀 기사를 하다가 그래서 근데 수소에 인도 계계 따라야 아니 제가 디펜스에 용도스 선상 다리테 가로테데 인도 수소 인도 미주미야야 근데 디펜스 시나 존선에 되는 뜻이 쉬어서 Any other questions?
나는 대체다 좋아하면은 제가 그러다는데 직송으로 제가 먼저 취직이 지금 차니 서로다 준다면 난 낭비 취 지금 차니 늦게 상담을 해 렌딩 나기였는데 기침 거래 로와 레가 나야 내가 요래 레게 봤으니 지요래 근데 레 맞아 받아 못해 봤어요 요래 레지가 충분하다 왔어요 요래 자상 대조는 내서 당하면서 춘나래 쟁에게 나래 진수도 끌리지 않아요 또 변도가 친구요래 간다 le ne passé le ne passé 다 소소가 le 간지 제게나 대단 상비 소소래야 리브지 용거래서 대자장 해봐래 랭해 봐서 상보 소소가 le 상보지 제나 대 리브지 상보지 용아 땡기 바래스 랭해 봐지 제나 소소 리브 동에 주요 땡기 바래스 근데 이제 말한서 추구로로 진행이 차네 지금 뒤에 통도 찍는 소소게 추를 로조지야다 나래지게 틀에 때네 소소를 랑상 세번 주어 마대 받아 지 랑상 랑줄에 똑바로게 맞춤 맞지어 있나요 아니 대대지 주제를 때네 아니 무슨 지 추에서게 시라시라 변동하는 소소라고 되네 이거서 말해 근데 이거이나 아니 렌딩이 나게 살아야 당고 기침 말이야 제가 다양 레게 디범미야 되야 레들이야 통준 노주가 레세 지금 거래 되네 제네 노주가 레세 지금 거래 라나 샤라 뇨비 레세 지금 거래 제가 통준 노주가 레세한테 센들이야 소소 레상에 가요로마지 사디 대디브디도 가요로마지 센들 노예 지금 거래 근데 레디가 나게더라 통준 노주가 레세 거래 누에서 센터래야 지금 통화에 가고 정부도 손에 누에서 뒤에 센터 통화에 가지고 맨날 그런 거 연구를 시키잖아 다 전에 노조해야 돼 센디를 소소하게 레상에 가야 로마지 사니 네 저 지마티 강래야 레상에 되게 저거 상에 매바지고 될 전에 노조가 레서 다 레랑 시간 용서인데 다 센디 가야 소소 레상에 가야 로마지 사니 tini jiwa nipa somba tadana ma ngimeki ane maambare jenjita tepe kare ya ane tanda jiwa ndege sabi le tindibate ane miya jiwa tali ya ane le rang shala nyampi le yasi chasang tanda ina maroto tanda chu ji nale jini kari jiwa tege jiwa jikina tsendile sen juwa tepa tang 저절 떠가지고 요새를 때려지 마죠 이네 저 니가 그래야 근데 저 지마도 그래야 말서 제 단다기 소소 레상부 때가 들을 때네 제 바샤 치바지 줘야다 저 지마나서 저 지마들이야 소소야 세 릴러불만에 줘야다 되겠다 줄 떠가지고 때네 요새를 때려지 마죠 이네다 저 정말 좀 변제 tenderleya sodoleya le teke dibete tende noayo de jire tende neyi le ne paa sayade inje minje saatangwa jire tende le maje pada mete paa sayade jire tende le maje pada mete paa sayade tanda maranzo je zaya tuya le kane me paa sagre da shira kane maduwa rawa so chohina da jazang ane zubaya tena kalam kanda yodeya da je nima reshi do soso 추도래 집하고 퇴산지야요. 다다 담예데 날 소소게 레 정보 틀을 때니 다나마도 디베티 로스 요고요. 제가 레 마제 받은 메제 받아요. 말로는 되는 뒤니 추르는 지야데 늘이야. 말로도 된다기 지 능류 토네 추르는 지야게 레중도 로요. 레중도 주소 레중도 마사월 디베티는 유시예요 말. 제가 먼저 지와 먼저 기능 거로 제가 내 맞게 받은 거 해봤어. 레지 늘이야 레 지금도 마사월 데디베티 뭐 말해서 그래. 제가 말해서 그래. 레지가 주면서 왔어야 돼. 다나마도 그래제니 제 주에 도상 거서 제가 이나 아니 티 레자모 제가 잡고대 아니 지금 빨리 뒤에 뭐지 그래. 근데 대화가 초라도 인도 살았다. 내가 찾을게 해야 말해. 좋아. 컨트롤해서 되게 많이 봐이나 대대대 매일 대그래 뭐 벌써 진짜 되게 대내서 뭐 되게 서로 먼저 요한지 네바 저한테 이제 양문서 최진의 질문이 되서야 상하야 나나 은소소지 처리될 때 뭐 이거 살았지. 은소도 걸리잖아요. 이제 단단하게 내시면 제가 제가 주요사는 로데고 타네. 근데 내지는 소소 주나래지 어떠서데 so the Chagi Kaya by the Tujamano, and the Joan Jinipa, Mentuni, the Monkey Ruta, not to ever, and there, the Lodem Yasa, now we're Kichimare.
Yes, it's very important that when uh, when we practice Dharma, we should always have a motivation of practicing for yuans and yuans. That motivation is very important. It's a very the prayers and dedication that we do. It's very clear that regardless of how long it may take, I will do so to practice and gain enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And this motivation is very, very important to have. So in order to have such motivations, to remain oneself so motivated in terms of practice of Dharma, it is always important to reflect one's mind upon those the varieties of karma, such as karma which result is very definite. Once one is accumulated, one will experience its result, in other words. A karma that will not experience, that has not been committed by oneself. And once karma is done, the result will not be disappeared. In other words, the result will be always there. So if one engages in negative karma, negative deeds, one will experience positive results. And if one engages in, positive deeds, sorry. It is the other way around, in other words, I'll say that. It's quite long, so my notes are 2 pages almost. So it's just an excuse and my mistake. But and another, so as a result of negative deeds, one, go through experience in the future. So this one should always reflect upon this different kinds of karma and its result. Because there are many who are actually initially they become very good practitioner and so motivated. And if they are kind of really, if they really become a goal oriented, then that's a little problem. Thinking of having this result in a very short time. Well, I'm practicing today, or maybe I may be able to become someone in maybe a couple of months or a couple of years. And that is, again, it's a problematic for the practitioners. And I see that people tend to have this kind of attitude, and then when they are unable to make any change within a short period of time by practicing, they tend to give up their practice because there's no benefit at all. I'm not being able to change my mind. I'm not able to gain any realizations from Dharma even though I practiced. So this kind of attitude should not be adopted. One should not have this kind of attitude. As we discussed earlier, that we should always motivate it to remain in this world, to dispel the misery of other sentient beings. As long as the sentient beings remains. So this kind of motivations should always have. Because To have such motivations, then here important to reflect upon the karma and its result. There is also a karma that its result can be experienced within this lifetime alone. In other words, if one has committed this karma in the early part of one's life, one received its result in the later part of one's life. And there are karma that can be results, the karmic results can be experienced in a very next lifetime. And there are again karmas that result can be experienced in a successive future lifetimes, from second lifetime, third lifetime, fourth lifetime, fifth lifetime, and so on. There's no such karmic result can be rapid upon certain time, because it really varies in the intensity of the karma and the situation and the circumstances. So, whereby the benefits of reflecting one's mind upon this karma and its result, that as long as I practice, I will receive the result. This kind of motivation will be able to generate within one's mind. Even though that I may have not gained much realizations, or I may have not made much change in my mind, I will continuously, practice Dharma, and I will never give up my practice of Dharma, because as long as I have received, as long as I practice, the result will be experienced by myself in the future. If not very next lifetime, but the successive next lifetimes. Because when you practice, we always implant a propensity or imprints within one's mind. And once you have left the propensities or imprints within one's continuum, and at some point, when this propensity is met with condition, and the result is inevitable. So just think about the karma, that its result is very definite, and karma that we have not accumulated will not experienced. And once you have committed the karma, whether it is positive or negative, the result will be experienced. The result will not, disappear. It will experience. For instance, at this point, pretty sure that we are here, several of us, we're not having a difficulty of, our daily foods. We're not having a difficulty of our shelter. We all have all this because this is a result of our karma in the past. And also the time that we're taking in discussing on Dharma in this center are all result of our past karma. We are experiencing this result of our karma. So as long as one has accumulated karma, whether it is be it as a positive or negative, its result will never disappear. At some time, that positive, and it can be the result can be prevented by means of our anger and hatred sometime. But once you have committed the karma, be it as a positive or negative, if it is not interrupted by angers and so on, one will experience this result. And so, therefore, even though one should have these motivations, even though I may not be able to have any realization of this lifetime, so long as I engage in the practice, receive the teachings, in the future, I myself will be the one who will receive these benefits. And this is kind of motivation can be very alive if one is able to reflect one's mind upon the varieties of karma and its results.
So we should say the dedication prayer beginning with page 23 and 24 and continue with auspicious wishes on page 28. Dagi yine zape
Yoni Dedan Ruan Gulam Kambe Chaba Juzu Rosan Tabai Ibe Nimboren Do Saje Jo
Dagi Tuki
Choye Medo Na Rira Deje Nide Jaman Saje Jibo Mende Bawai Roge Namda Yama Chebara Jo
Tiwa Kundu
Yanda Lama Dan Dame Cheche Bela Nuje Sada Namji Yude Razoni Dache Changi Gopan Yudo
Idambu
Rana Mendala Gandeya Tayame
Jetsu Name
Radenje Nagatale Joju Jibo Oza Dimi Dimi Sasu Rave Mese Taso Di Juroji
Agri Rawe
Kore Jibanzu Beda Dewa Mane Juven Kere Zaman Tindi Jasui Yabe Zede Bado Den Juroji
Chakra Power
Cheta Jebana Godo Sambo Deya Deyende Deda Kunji Jizo Daroji Gewa Deda Tamji Rodomo Teson Kebe Jawa Tanji Moa Kana Chodo Ngapane Dagi Give Sawan Digwin Sambo Juji Rodomo Wani